WA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over.
Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Anomaly-NOW. Straight out of Austin, Texas, I'm your host, Smiles Lewis. This is the weekly, very rarely these days, live weekly Anomaly news and media roundup for the nonprofit 501c3 Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives. Thank you for joining me, whether you are watching this or listening to it. However you are receiving this information, thank you. All right. Yeah, so we're going to be dropping this episode on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. Today is October 21st, 2025. And of course, tomorrow we are having a special presentation, our monthly online lecture series, the Anomaly Academy lecture series for our patrons, folks who are signed up at a certain tier or higher for our patreon.com/Anomaly Archives service. We are going to be hosting. This is going up tomorrow. That is going to be Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. Expanding Frontiers researchers Erica Lukes and Jack Brewer are going to be talking about the Cold War and UFOs. Very much looking forward to that. Hope you'll go over to our patreon.com/Anomaly Archives page and sign up for that. And then you can also, coming up less than a week later, we are going to have a special presentation from good friend Brad Abrahams, Close Encounters of the Humankind. We're going to explore the cinema of the unseen, and that is coming up October 28th, 2025. That is in a week from now. And that's going to be very exciting. He, of course, is the director, creator, mastermind behind a number of fantastic documentaries on strange subjects like Love and Saucers, that crazy, wild story about a New York artist who has memories and began painting them about his early age abduction, close encounter experiences, very sexually charged adult material, as well as conspiracy crews and other documentaries about Sasquatch, Bigfoot, skunk apes, cryptozoology subjects, as well as the subjects of conspiracy like Do You See What I See, about a legendary, infamous graphic artist whose art you undoubtedly saw if you ever dipped your toe into the conspiracy scene over the last 20 years or so. And many other wonderful things like Telos or Bust and Keep Folklore Alive, which is the subtitle, I think, for the Telos or Bust series. Anyway, really looking forward to hearing from Brad Abrahams and seeing what he has to say, and then having a nice discussion with him. And hopefully, if you're there with us, you can ask some questions of Brad. All right, so jumping right in, of course, you can go to our website. That is anomalyarchives.org. That is where we have all kinds of information on let's put that up there. Yes, anomalyarchives.org is where we have thousands of pages on our 7,000 plus books and periodicals and digital files and media files. Of course, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you can go and look at all the past in-person and online events that we've held. We're making a lot more stuff public all the time. And if you go to Anomaly Archives, you can click through to our Patreon page. You can find out more about our participation in local nonprofit community organizations like Co-op, KOOP, Radio 91.7 FM. They have a wonderful community organization group where they support local nonprofits by allowing them access to the airwaves. And you can also find our back issues of our newsletter. We just put out a new newsletter and update yesterday, as well as links to our Flipboard, which of course has thousands and thousands of news items that we've aggregated over the last several years. And so, of course, that page is this page right here. And yeah, so there's, like I say, a ton of news, and I'm going to try to keep this episode short because I have a lot of work to do, but, and it's all Anomaly Archives related. Yes. All right. But, oh yes, you can also go to our website where we have the show notes for each each weekly episode of Anomaly Now, which has links to the past archives, audio-only archives, the video archives, and each episode has its own page with links to articles that were discussed, as well as articles we didn't get to, because there's always just too much news to get to. But you can find all that over at the anomalyarchives.org webpage. And of course, like I say, if you go to our patreon.com/anomalyarchives page and sign up for free, or give us $1, $2, $5, or $10 a month, it would really help us on our journey to getting back into a physical facility. And we're just raring to go. So hopefully you can help with that. Okay. So, last couple of shows, we've talked about the sad passing of Jane Goodall and other legends in the cryptozoology scene. And I want you to be aware of, and I highly recommend, as always, everything done by Micah Hanks. You can go to micahhanks.com. That's MICAHHANKS.com. But he also has SasquatchTracks.com for his other podcast, his cryptozoology-oriented podcast. And their latest episode, after a long break, came out on October 7th. It's titled Remembering Jeff Meldrum and Jane Goodall. This is their 67th episode, and it is a great tribute to these legends, these pioneers in the fields of their own areas of interest. And here you can see a picture of Jeff Meldrum with Jane Goodall. She provided a blurb to one of his most famous books. And as I explained in past episodes of the show, she was really supportive of the cryptozoology field and the study of reports of undiscovered relict hominoids, or Bigfoot as commonly known. But yes, you can go to SasquatchTracks.com and look for this most recent episode. I forget how long, it's about an hour and a half. But anyway, check that out. Highly recommend that. And, some of you may recall our reporting on the Wall Street Journal's takedown of the UFO community, their 2-part article that supposedly may have more parts coming. This came out, when was it? Yes, back in June. Part 1 was called The Pentagon Disinformation That Fueled America's UFO Mythology, subtitled U.S. Military Fabricated Evidence of Alien Technology and Allowed Rumors to Fester to Cover Up Real Secret Weapons Programs. Duh. Well, there is a new episode of their Wall Street Journal podcast called The Pentagon's UFO Cover-Up, and it is available for free, and you can go and check that out and listen to the audio there. It's about, I think, 18 minutes. There is nothing that real new or startling about it, but if you're following along, it's worth taking a listen, I suppose. There is also a full transcript that you can read along with if that's your preferred method of ingesting information. But they interview one of the main researchers, writers for that article, the series of articles, Joel Sheckman. Like I say, I don't think there's really anything new here, but just there's a little bit more. It just rounds out their storytelling of this perspective. And of course, one of the main perspectives in it is this, what was called Yankee Blue, in which if you go to the Anomaly Archives webpage, we have a page called Yankee Blue UFO, as well as another page called Arts Parts Alleged Roswell or Other Crashed UFO Crash Retrieval Material. And these were the two things that are covered in this Wall Street Journal series of articles, as well as in this podcast, this idea that the Air Force seeded the idea of crashed recovery programs and recovered bodies and craft at local Rachel, Nevada, outside Area 51 restaurant, bar, or whatever, back, decades ago, as a way to disinform the public about their secret weapons programs going on at Area 51. This is an old idea. It's nothing new. This idea that, maybe the government and military played up the wacky UFO stories as a way for cover of their programs. And since Area 51 was supposed to be secret, but there's no way you can keep a secret in the world we live in, even pre-internet or as the internet was about to come online. It's kind of like raise the profile, but control the narrative. That is the long-running hypothesis by many UFO researchers about what was going on there. And then this idea of a hazing program, or whether official or just employees of the military and the Air Force on their own doing this whole Yankee Blue thing. Now, recall also that John Greenwald of the Black Vault did FOIA requests for anything related to the supposed Yankee Blue information. They returned nothing, so there was nothing, no memos, nothing to support this claim. And so we've only had the Wall Street Journals and presumably Sean Kirkpatrick's, the former head of Arrow, who released their report. And of course, a new report is coming out later this month, supposedly, or it should, about the government Arrow office's attempts to investigate UFOs. Where am I going? Why am I bringing all this up again? Well, again, because of this Wall Street Journal podcast, you can go check that out, as I mentioned. And yes, that's over at Wall Street Journal /podcast/the-journal, the Pentagon's UFO cover up. But the other thing, so this isn't exactly new, but Matt Laszlo of Ask a Poll UAP, he's our guy on the ground, your guy on the ground, the people's man there at the Capitol, trying to get answers from these legislators, these senators, etc., on the subject of UFOs, UAP, among other subjects. But he has several. He has one that's on drugs and politics and whatever. But back, I guess this is in June. No, this is only a few days ago in October. I think he may have released this earlier, a version of this. But yes, he was interviewing Senator Kirsten Gillibrand about that Wall Street Journal article. And he had brought copies to give to senators saying, have you read this? What is your response to this? And the headline is, I don't know which is true. Gillibrand on the Wall Street Journal report of decades-long Air Force UFO psyop. And yeah, I wanted to play a little clip of this. And again, thanks to Matt Laszlo at askapollUAPs.com. And of course, the links will be in the show notes. And fair warning, Senator Gillibrand drops the F-bomb. So here we go.
Hello, Brad Homer. You ever to read that? Check it out, because if its claims were true, then I'll never ask you about a UFO again.
Really? What does it say?
I think Kirkpatrick's their main source for it.
What's it say?
Well, it says that there's basically this Air Force psyop, the 60s on, where they made up the whole myth around Area 51.
That's what I understand to be true.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I just he explained to me that, there was a lot of people who said they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to work on aliens. And so they were told, if you tell anybody, we'll kill you. And so I believe that happened multiple times. And then the DOD's answer was, it was just a ruse. We were trying to, they said it was like hazing.
Yeah.
I was like, well,
That's what this thing claims.
You've been hazing people for 20 fucking years.
Yeah.
You have a real problem.
Right.
So I was very mad about it when I heard this.
Yeah.
But I never got clarity whether it really was.
Well, it's interesting.
Or whether there is a program. Like, I don't know which is true.
And read this, I think they have 18 or so sources. It's a well-sourced article. So that's where I'm
They think it is true.
Yeah, but it seems to me that Kirkpatrick was their source.
The hazing ritual of telling people they were working on alien spacecraft or alien materials. But then second, this says that they also had the lore of Area 51 for what purpose?
Basically, to get the American public talking about it, to basically hide stealth technology and stuff, which I'm like, sounds plausible. Psyop on top of psyop.
I don't know if this is true.
Yeah.
So that's my problem.
All right. So yeah, and sorry for the audio there. I was quote unquote enhanced, and the enhancement often introduces its own artifacts and makes their voices sound weird. Sometimes it makes me sound like I have a lisp. But anyway, yeah, it's nice. I'm so glad that Matt Laszlo is there doing this. But there it is. She confirms that she had been talked to about this. and that it was Kirkpatrick when he was the head of Arrow, and she tends to agree. She's like, this seems to be true, that there was this disinfo campaign to cover up what was going on at Area 51. But then are these separate issues? Is that different than the hazing issue and the NDA issue and the threatening of whistleblowers and with UFO witnesses and that sort of thing? Complicated for sure. All right. Well, briefly, I skipped over something else I wanted to mention, which is in a previous episode or two, I had mentioned that the National Archives, as part of its requirement, as part of the Arrow, etc., UFO, UAP initiatives that the government has started over the last few years, all these agencies are required to collect all their UFO information and make it public. And not too long ago, kind of quietly, the National Archives put out a series of videos. This is all online. You can go find it. I'll try to put the links in the show notes. But one of the videos that they put out, and it's a video of like footage of somebody handling UFO photos and videotaping their handling of the photos. And this is most of the stuff in this particular video is stuff related to Roswell, allegedly. Now, none of it there's no citations for this stuff per se. And so it's really unclear, and I've edited this clip just to show you the specific thing, but I'm going to link to something else. But yeah, here's about a minute and 13 seconds of something that I think is worth checking out, and I've been meaning to talk about on the show here. So yeah. So here, National Archives, archives.org or .gov, excuse me. 341 point Roswell. So yeah, I skipped to this part where there's this crater that somehow is allegedly associated with Roswell. Don't know the source of this, but several people have pointed this out and tried to visualize, is that craft debris? Is there a body visible? Of course, people will see all kinds of things. This apparently is an aerial photograph of a crash site somewhere. Again, who knows where this is, but it's interesting. But notice that in these photographs, we're looking at a crater, a something digging into the earth. And of course, most of the mythology of Roswell involves reports of a crater and a craft embedded. Now, of course, there's this whole idea of there being multiple crash sites, not just the one. There's the Corona and the Roswell. And there's been suggestions that there were two craft that hit each other and that the wreckage of the craft was at the other site. And so maybe that's the other site. But again, none of this is definitive. Oh, that reminds me. I forgot to pull up the page that I was going to use to describe this other thing. And where is... Yeah, Kevin Randall over at his blog was reporting on when this... Presumably he reported on this when it was released. Somebody brought it to his attention. And he talked about how the footage differed from the debris site and the crash site that he had investigated and that he knew to be real. Here's Bill Brazel and Don Schmidt on the debris field, photo by Kevin Randall. And another one, Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall on the impact site, 2023. Site was identified by several eyewitnesses. Yes, here's another article. True photos of the Roswell crash site taken much later than 1947. Anyway, all of this is to say again that this he and others are saying that crash site that we showed the video for does not appear to be anything related to that, which again, earlier in that same video is just video footage of like classic Roswell UFO books. So maybe those photos appeared somewhere, but you could see they seemed like separate photos, not as part of a book that were being handled by the videographer. Now, the reason I bring all this up is because of the interview that Ryan Sprague did on his Somewhere in the Skies show recently with David Marler of National UFO Historical Record Center there in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's some really great stuff coming out of their archives. Thank goodness that they have preserved this material. And we mentioned that there was this long lost interview with Lee Spiegel interviewing the original Jesse Marcel Sr. of the Roswell crash story. And here is that in that clips from that go to the subject of the crash site.
Original recordings between Lee Spiegel and Jesse Marcel Sr. from 1979, 1980. Early interviews. And in the interview, Lee asks a very simple question. Mr. Marcel, when you arrived at the debris field, was there an area of impact or like a gouge in the ground or a burned area?
This is what happened. I scoured the ground. I looked all over the place to see if I could see the scar on the ground. It's something that had fallen out of the sky and hit the ground. But that was not an evidence at all. It was obviously something that exploded while in flight and scattered all the fragments on the ground, and it traveled. I think the one thing that stands foremost is the fact that with all this debris scattered over such a wide area, nothing actually hit the ground. No solid material hit the ground. I mean, no one object hit the ground. Mm-hmm. It disintegrated in the air before the particles came down.
And we looked at each other when we heard his response. He categorically said no. There was no gouge. There was no burned area. There was no impact site. It was just the ground was littered with all this metal material. He literally said, is that this stuff just came flittering out of the sky. Now, I only say that because there is UFO reality and there's UFO mythology. And, where does one begin and end? And admittedly, sometimes they overlap. We have this coherent narrative that's kind of become a central trope of UFO believers with regard to Roswell. But here, I think you would agree, arguably, is the primary witness, Jesse Marcel Sr., in 1979, 1980, basically saying there was no gouge or impact site. But that is like one of the sacred descriptions that we now cling to. That's part of the mythology or the narrative. But here is an early interview with Marcel where he denies that there was any impact site.
That there was any gouge at the crash site. Yep. Now, again, there may be more to this, but it's good to go back to earliest sources. And that interview between Lee Spiegel and Jesse Marcel Sr. circa 1979, 1980 would be one of the earliest modern investigations of that. All right, moving right along. In case you hadn't heard, The Age of Disclosure, the documentary revealing government cover-up of non-human intelligence, sets release in theaters and on Amazon Plus new trailer. This being reported by Variety. That's over at Variety.com, October 16th. The Age of Disclosure, Dan Farrah's buzzy documentary that aims to establish that we're not alone in the universe, is finally making its way to the masses. The film will have an Oscar qualifying run in select theaters in New York and Los Angeles, beginning on November 21st, along with a concurrent release on Amazon Prime Video. Additionally, a new trailer for the film was released on Thursday. Not a lot to go on, but hey, yay, there's finally a release date for this. Still haven't seen it. Very curious to see what it really shows. Is there really anything important or new here other than the fact that there appear to be more quote unquote respected government intel military types going public on the record about what they either have witnessed or what they believe about the subject of UFOs and the government and potential cover-ups. And again, I will say, there is concern about who funded this and what is the real agenda behind this. And it's all kind of odd given where we find ourselves now. But before I go to where we find ourselves, I'll just continue on with some other news articles, just briefly touching on the area of drones, because now in our modern era, in this recent post-2017 era, but really just since in the last 5-6 years, really 2019, 2020 on, the issue of drones and the military and their danger to us has become increasing. And this recent New Jersey drone scare flap that wasn't just New Jersey, and it wasn't just all misidentifications, because there were drones of import and concern cited multiple times over military bases. Again, not just in the 2024, 2025, but as far back as 2019, 2020, there have been these multiple flaps. Again, mostly over military bases. Those are the ones that seem the most concerning. But of course, there is somebody now coming out, and this is not just the New York Post, not the most reputable news outlet, but others are reporting on this. But that this headline from Shane Galvin at NewYorkPost.com, NYPost.com: New Jersey drone and UFO scare solved. Private contractor unveils strange aircraft, takes credit for sky mystery. And, the craft here that they're talking about is one that I think was discussed by multiple people as a possible source of some of the sightings of quote unquote car-sized drones. Well, this isn't a drone per se. This is a personal flying vehicle. You've probably seen it. Everybody makes the joke about, I was promised a future with flying cars like the Jetsons. Well, this is the closest we've come to. There's one or two others, but the closest we've come to a modern personal flying vehicle, a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. It's basically just a car with four. It's a car-sized quadcopter. But again, the question becomes, how really long can this stay in the air? This article from the New York Post says a private company at a high-powered Army conference demonstrated a unique aircraft at the event and allegedly took responsibility for setting off last year's drone and UFO pandemonium in New Jersey, a source told the Post. At the Army's UAS and Launched Effects Summit at Fort Rucker in August, a private contractor conducted a live demonstration of a manned aerial craft that wowed the crowd with its unconventional appearance and unorthodox flight movements. An attendee told the Post. Quote, "You remember that big UFO scare in New Jersey last year? Well, that was us," an employee of the unnamed contractor claimed to a small group after the demonstration, according to the source who was invited to the summit. The company was in the air over the Garden State in November 2024 to, quote, test out their capabilities, unquote. The contractor's employee claimed to the source, adding they were not required to disclose their activity to the public because of a private government contract. This actually kind of fits with some of what we heard from the officials, but it also, if true, if a significant, or at least the seed events for the non-military incursion, because I don't think it's where the military people were seeing drones, that was no test of this. Those were considered incursions. Continuing from the article, in video provided to the Post, the roughly 20-foot across four-winged flyer zooms through the skies just above the tree line, drawing the attention of dozens of soldiers on the ground. I thought it was the military testing out on the other side of the base. The source, a military veteran drone expert, said of their first impression of the flying object on August 12th at Fort Rucker. Quote, "It feels like it's a UFO because it defies what you're expecting to see," they said, adding there was a, quote, "uncanny valley feeling," unquote, when watching it quietly motor through the sky. When it turned, you almost completely lose sight of it, the source said, of the roughly 30-minute demonstration in the controlled airspace of Fort Rucker. I have my doubts. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention so you know that's out there. More interesting, perhaps, is this recent 13-minute video news brief by, is it Ken Klippenstein? I hope that I've got the right. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No. Sorry. Not that guy. This is from Merrick von Rennenkampf, who is a journalist that's been working for UFO related news outlets, including the Soul Foundation, which is not a news outlet per se. But in this recent video from 5 days ago, drone motherships, quote unquote, now over Europe, and virtual access to the upcoming Soul Foundation symposium. Now, I don't have any clips from this, but I would encourage you to check this out because he does a good job of giving a synopsis of the issue of these claims of motherships associated with some of both the recent European drone incursions around, I believe, mostly civilian airports. But he brings this in the context of what I was alluding to earlier, these 2019 and 2020 and 2021 Midwest American military and rural drone flaps military drone incursion, military base incursions where motherships were seen. And the idea of these motherships is, again, that a larger drone that hovers for way longer than should be possible with known drone technology, which makes me think maybe it's an airship drone, like it's mainly keeping aloft, not through propellers, but through lighter than air capabilities, or maybe something more exotic, who knows? And that somehow it's able to launch and retrieve smaller drones, like the kinds you think of as maintained by civilians and some military, because these were described over and over again. And he goes into some great detail about that, which I think is a service to the UFO UAP community. But that's over at YouTube, the Saul Foundation channel. Okay, what's next? Right. Two other things I wanted to bring to your attention. So recently, the New Paradigm Institute, this is the organization of Danny Sheehan, held their Global Disclosure Day 2025, a historic turning point for truth, transparency, and citizen action. It was I think it was like over 4 hours, maybe longer, streaming event this past Sunday, October 19th. And I did not get the chance to watch it. It was briefly made private, but they have since put it as unlisted. We've got the link and you should be able to find it even without going to our show notes, but we will put it in the show notes. But other shows that I keep an eye on brought to my attention this interesting clip from Colonel Carl Nell.
Postulate I've got is that this recent cycle of disclosure that we might say started in 2017 with the Navy videos and Lou Elizondo coming out and as a whistleblower making various assertions, that cycle of disclosure is effectively ended with the failure to pass the UAP Disclosure Act and with sort of the fourth or third in a series of hearings on the topic that I think increasingly have moved the needle less and less. And so in some sense, it seems like the people that have been at the forefront of this recent cycle have said what they've had to say. It's starting to become stale in the sense of being repetitive. The conversation isn't necessarily advancing to new topics, but really more importantly, the mechanism in order to which to address these whistleblower issues is not gaining traction. And, particularly to kind of maybe amplify upon that, I think the essence of that Schumer-Rounds amendment was to create a management structure that you could argue perhaps mirrored the original process that was maybe put in place by Truman and Eisenhower to manage this topic, but to do it in a manner that was assured to have proper congressional oversight and proper transparency and accountability to elected officials, which had ceased to pertain at some point in the past. And so essentially by not passing this, Congress has written themselves out of any type of way forward, and without a control group to manage the policy aspect, then the government's really not going to be in a position to deal with ramification of any released material. And so increasing whistleblowers, increasing attention is going to force the government into a reactive mode and really a hunker down mode. So my view is that this cycle essentially has ended, and we should take stock of what worked and what didn't work to think about maybe a new way forward. So that's sort of my view on the current state of play.
Kind of an interesting perspective to express at Danny Sheehan's Global Disclosure Day event, don't you think? And interestingly enough, the same podcaster who brought this to my attention showed a clip that I'm not going to bother with, but Richard Dolan gave his feedback and was like, well, I hear what you're saying, and I think there's some truth to it, but this is not like, this ain't our first rodeo, folks. This has been a cycle, like described by Carl Nell, that's going on for some time. And this is just the latest one. And I think the most salient thing perhaps that Richard Dolan said in the clip I saw was that perhaps the interval between these cycles will be lessened, and that it seems in some ways easier to, and the podcaster was saying it's easier now. There's a lot more wealth of content about all these subjects, which I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing, but anyway, very interesting. Apparently hours and hours of dialogue amongst various UFO, UAP researchers, activists, etc. So you may want to go check that out, and I'll probably get around to watching more of it as I have time. What else we got? Oh, lastly, no, it's a couple of things. So let's see. Right. Again, another show brought to my attention. This clip from a recent appearance of Paul H. Smith on the show Third Eye Drops with Michael Phillip. Now, Paul Smith is an old friend of mine, or at least I've known him since approximately, 2000 to 2002, sometime in there. I think I met him, though I think he's expressed to me that he thinks we met before then. But suffice to say, Paul Smith used to live here in Austin, Texas, and while he was going to University of Texas, and we had the opportunity to interact several times. The different nonprofits that I've been involved with were interacting with him because of his being a militarily trained remote viewer. And yeah, I interviewed him for the Austin Para-Times newspaper that I was editing back in 2002, 2003. And I've interviewed him for my PSYOP radio show. And he, of course, presented to our 2020 Streamathon, our fundraiser that we did through YouTube. And anyway, he's moved away, but I always love to hear what he's got going on and talk to him. But yeah, check out this 3-minute clip that I put together from this most recent show with Michael Phillip called Third Eye Drops. Classified, UFOs, remote viewing, and the consciousness mystery, which also features Richard Dolan again.
Because I don't want to name names, but I've kind of tried to stay out of it, but I've not been able to because of, essentially the company I keep. I'm close friends with Hal Putoff, and Ingo Swann, of course, was very much interested in ETs, particularly in their abilities to engineer and manipulate consciousness. I finally decided it was time to become serious about it with the Nimitz incident, which I had actually been exposed to in 2004. Not 2004, 2011. And that kind of brought me around. So that's how I got into this.
Quick follow-up, just curiosity question. How did that come across your plate in 2011? Did someone from the inside want to see what you thought about it, or?
I was hired to put together a team of people to remote view that incident.
Wow.
Through, as you can imagine, what was going on at the time. I have this NDA, and I'm not sure what I can say. Everybody else seems able to talk about it, but I apparently can't.
Can we ask if this was part of the OSAP or ATIP programs?
Oh, it might have been. Very, very high likelihood that it might have been, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you've got people like Hal Putoff involved in that.
Oh yes, he was our manager.
Why would they not?
He was our go-between, right? We didn't do a very good job for reasons I've since think I teased out, but it was a marvelous effort. We had a building dedicated to our particular use. We created 3 gray remote viewing rooms like we used to have at Fort Meade. I had 3 monitors and 6 viewers and 2 analysts and a administrative assistant, and it was a full-fledged project for a full week. And I wish we'd had better success, but but still, even just the very experience of it and the practice at doing a good operation was awesome. It was awesome.
That's
That might be
real
new
cool.
information.
Yeah.
And so I only have vague memories of what came out, but it really wasn't very well. Really didn't produce a lot of good information about that incident. And I didn't even know what the target was until later. Hal under the table informed me about it.
Spilled the beans. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's extremely interesting.
So, yeah, of course, Paul also gave a lecture here in Austin at our Anomaly Archives location on the subject of remote viewing and UFOs. But of course, he continued to hold this kind of information very close to his chest. That was not part of that presentation. So this is a new revelation. I don't know that he's ever spoken about this publicly. Interestingly enough, Kelly Chase and Jay King's Cosmosis, formerly UFO Rabbit Hole podcast, they have just released a video of Paul Smith's lecture at the recent IRVA, International Remote Viewing Association, IRVA conference that they attended. Of course, they're out in the field producing new video vignettes for their ongoing Cosmosis related content creation. And I don't recall, I did watch, I don't recall if he mentions this again, but this may be an exclusive. It probably is for this Third Eye Drops with Michael Phillip show. And there's some other interesting stuff in that. I haven't finished watching it yet, so there's still probably maybe some more revelations, but that is very interesting that the inference is that he was tasked by Hal Puthoff via the Robert Bigelow BAASS, the BASS contracted program that we think of as the OSAP ATIP Pentagon UFO program. Well, and it draws into question like what I've always wondered about Lou Elizondo's involvement in remote viewing. When did he become part of any kind of remote viewing process? Maybe it was this team. Maybe, I don't know. There's still so much we don't know about the history of the OSAP ATIP period of time, the program. Of course, some folks have done lots of research on the whole Skinwalker Ranch aspect of this. Then there's all the DIRDs and documentation that's been released or leaked. Honestly, as much as I am a fan of and interested in remote viewing, I do have my concerns and skepticism about it, even though I do believe that all humans are psychic to a greater or lesser degree, and that there is a true kernel of realness to remote viewing. I do think there's also probably something else going on there with the government's use of it, but it's just as Paul Smith would be the first to say, you need to, if you're going to do good remote viewing, it needs to be the remote viewer needs to be blind to the target. They can't know the nature or information about the target, and preferably it's a randomized selection of the target so that the person working with them, the tasker, doesn't even know the target. But if the tasker knows the pool of targets, they know what it could be. And then if they start sensing that the remote viewer may have tapped into the correct target, or something that they know is one of the target pool of targets, then you're going off into possibly just simple telepathic transfer, if you even believe in that sort of stuff. And then if you don't, then you can think of it just being like the idea of hypnosis and the therapist leading the witness subtly, unconsciously. All these things are valid criticisms of the vast majority of what people think of as remote viewing research and remote viewing sessions. But now I'm just sounding like a skeptic, but hey, that's part of my being. All right. One last thing here. So as people who've been watching the show know, I've been binge watching all the old Northern Exposure 1990s TV episodes. And as always, there's almost in every episode some kind of reference to folklore, paranormal phenomena, synchronicities, occasionally rare things like UFOs. But I remember so many decades ago when I think it was my good friend Robert Larson of the Excluded Middle, one of the three main guys behind that publication, Greg Bishop, Robert Larson, Peter Stenchel, brought to my attention that there was an episode that involved dream switching. And in fact, that's something that I have experience with from high school. And I've probably told this story multiple times on the show. But basically, when I was in high school, I had my best friend's dream and he had my dream. And ever since, that's just one of the many experiences in my life that's made me go, there's something more to the nature of reality. And dreams are very psychic and paranormal. And it's something that I've always felt have relevance to these strange phenomena. Well, I don't know if I ever actually got to see this episode. I've been watching, and there's been episodes that I thought might have been the one that my friend Robert had told me about. But no, last night I came across Season 5, Episode 12, Mr. Sandman, which first aired January 10th, 1994. And the synopsis is pretty minimal. The citizens of Sicily start having strange dreams. They soon realize they're sharing each other's dreams. And it's attributed to an intense aurora borealis happening above the town there in Alaska, Sicily, Alaska. And basically, different people in the town start having each other's dreams. They experience dream switching. Maybe not as one-to-one as I described from my experience as a teenager with my best friend, one of my best friends. But anyway, as always, I really enjoyed the episode, and maybe you might enjoy that kind of thing. So, well, that's going to be it for today, October 21st, 2021. I hope you will join us tomorrow night for the latest Anomaly Academy presentation by our friends Erica Lukes and Jack Brewer on the Cold War and UFOs. That's Wednesday, October 22nd. That's tomorrow, October 22nd. And you should join us via patreon.com. And if you are of a certain tier or higher, you'll have access to that. And then, like I mentioned, coming up in less than a week after that, a special surprise presentation by our good friend Brad Abrahams, where he'll explore the cinema of the unseen in a presentation we're calling Close Encounters of the Humankind. And very much looking forward to that presentation and discussion afterwards. He, of course, is the creator of so many wonderful paranormal, parapolitical oriented documentaries like Love and Saucers, Do You See What I See, Conspiracy Cruise, etc., etc. And that's going to be it, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.